Thanks for joining us at the Business Growth Café, where each week we select from a menu of topics for a focused discussion with an industry expert to provide insights that can impact your business's growth. With your host, Angelo Ponzi.
Hi, I'm Angelo Ponzi, your host here at the Business Growth Café, and thank you for joining me. Are you listening? Not only to my show, but in general, do you listen? When you're having a conversation, do you really listen to the conversation? Do you contribute to the discussion? Or are you just one of those people who just can't wait for the moment to insert whatever the hell is on your mind? Your opinion. Can I call you the interrupter? We're going to make t-shirts now. The interrupter. Now it's frustrating on both sides. If you're the person doing the interrupting, or if you've been the person being interrupted, it's a very frustrating experience. Now, I've not only experienced this in my business, but I've actually experienced this in my personal life as well. Now, you're telling a story, you're explaining a new idea, whatever, and boom, you're derailed because the person you are talking to takes you in a completely different direction. They want to tell you about their story, something that happened to them that may or may not even be relevant to whatever the hell you're talking about. It's their ideas. They're more important than what you're saying. Something happened to them, and frankly, they just want to share it. They didn't really, maybe weren't even listening to what you were saying. And frankly, sometimes they're just rambling on, ramble. We're going to call them the ramblers about their ideas with no relevancy to the conversation. You want to yell, hey, wait a minute now. I was actually talking. Were you not listening to anything I was just saying? I'd like to say a lot of describing some other adjectives, if you will, but I'm going to keep this show PG-13, maybe a little mature as we go along. But no offense, if you're that person, if you are the interrupter, no offense to you, but hopefully you'll listen, right? We're going to have a conversation. It's going to be a little bit of a one-way conversation because I'm the only one talking. So I hope you're going to sit back and listen. Think about what I'm going to be saying. Take it to heart. And maybe at the end, you might be a slightly better listener. Or if you're on the other side, you might learn some ideas and some skills on how to be a better listener and communicator. Now, I have to admit, on occasion, I've been that person that just want to jump in. I have something to say. I want to contribute. But so many times when you're having a conversation and people are responding, not about to what you're saying and asking questions and probing and trying to have a discussion, they want to just, again, share whatever was on their mind because maybe they had something similar or feel that what they're doing is more important or frankly take you on a path you just don't know where they're going. And my favorite, of course, is when people start interjecting and they start talking about people. I have no idea who they're talking about. Now, it might be important to you, but frankly, to your listener, the person that's having the conversation with you, going off and talking about a whole bunch of people that you have no idea who they are. And frankly, there's no relevance to what is happening unless it's a story very specifically to contribute to the conversation. So again, over the years, I have to admit, there's been on occasion, I'm not perfect. My mother told me I was perfect as a child, but I knew she was just saying that because she loved me, frankly. But I'm not perfect. And there's been an occasion when I've jumped in and maybe taken people on a different path. And I understand that. But frankly, as a marketer, part of my job is listening, is having conversations with a prospect or a client or an employee. And if I get it wrong, if I didn't listen, it could cost. I could have the wrong input that I'm giving to my team. I could create the wrong marketing materials. I could conduct research that had no bearing on the objectives of what we were trying to get to. It really creates a myriad of potential problems. Now, be honest with yourself. Have you ever been that person? Come on, raise your hands. Not listening or just waiting for the opportunity to grab hold of the conversation. So back to that interpreter or the rambler. Those are two names I'm going to use here, and we're going to make some t-shirts. If you want them, let me know. I know a few people who ramble. And listen, I get it. Sometimes you just want to talk. But again, you've got to judge the circumstances. You have to understand, is it business? Is it personal? Are you consoling? Are you consulting? Whatever you're doing really helps determine that situation. And when you're not listening in business, not only can mistakes happen, it can be costly. As I said earlier, you could be doing something wrong that impacts the business because you haven't listened, or frankly, you're only imposing your ideas and not listening to what others have to say. Believe it or not, good listening is a soft skill. You need to develop it. I mean, some people might be born with that capabilities, but it is a soft skill that you can develop. And it's going to be important in every aspect of your life, not just business. I know whether you're dealing with colleagues or friends or family and they don't want to listen, it can be, again, as I said, very frustrating. It can cause you to lose your trains of thought. That's happened to me many times. It's like, what the hell were we talking about? We went off on a tangent. I have no idea how am I going to get back to where I was, right? So I've been deviated. I've gone down to the side, that side path, taken a different road, if you will. So I'm going to quiz you now. I'm going to ask you to listen for the next 60 seconds. And if you're a visual learner, close your eyes and picture this.
When we think of silver bullets, we know they were the symbol for the Lone Ranger, and they certainly killed a werewolf or two. But I can't think of a silver bullet that solves all of your marketing and communications challenges. There is no silver bullet in marketing. I'm a big believer in integrated marketing, and perhaps even more importantly, integrated thinking. I don't believe there's one solution. If you look at your tactical options, it's important to understand how your target audiences consume media and how they use particular vehicles for gathering specific types of information. After all, the messages you can deliver in social media is very different from the message you can deliver in a TV spot, which is different from a radio spot, which is different from print. You get the idea. So think about your target audience, not only about how they consume media, but also their experience with your brand as well as your competitors. It's important to understand that ultimately when you develop your strategy, you need a clear idea of what you want to achieve. Is it about building awareness, about changing attitudes, influencing behaviors, or motivating your customers to do something very specific? Take time to develop the right strategy and let it drive your overall communications planning.
Visit theponzigroup.com to find out more.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you listened. I hope you took something away. That was my commercial. Now let me ask you, why do we listen? Why? We listen to obtain information. We listen to understand what's going on. We listen for enjoyment. And we listen to learn. And hopefully you're listening today and maybe all four of those points make sense. The skill really can be defined as active listening, right? So what is active listening? Now it involves paying attention to the conversation, not interrupting. Again, I'm starting to repeat myself. Maybe I'm going to be the repeater. Okay? Not interrupting yourself and taking time to understand what the speaker is saying, and then taking time to dig into the details. In other words, ask questions. Have a conversation, right? Have a conversation. I'm sure you know what a conversation is. It's a give and take. It's about asking questions. It's about showing concern and empathy for whatever the other person is talking, especially if you're consoling somebody. You really want to listen, right? Empathy is going to be extremely important, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Think about it. If you're not listening and interrupting constantly, do you really think you have a full grasp of the situation? Now it's essential. It's right, essential for the input. Could be dealing with a crisis of a friend, as I said. So listening is so important. We all have something we want to say. We all have a platform. We all want to communicate. And again, whether you're the boss of the company, whether you're a senior leader in the organization, whether you're in your church, or whether you're talking to your mom and dad or your kids or your spouse. Since I'm on the podcast and you can't really see me, but active listening also includes body language, right? How you look. What are you portraying? Are you portraying that you're not paying attention at all? And think about where we are today. We are in Zoom mania, Zoom media, do meetings on and on and on. Zoom this, Zoom that, Zoom. Now, in most of these, depending on whether you're a one-on-one, two-on-one, three-on-one, troikas, doikas, whatever they want to call them, is how much of the body you can see. But really on Zoom, we really don't get a chance to have and see the body language of the people that we're talking to. So therefore, looking at the person's eyes. Now, part of that might be where your camera is positioned. I'm not going to get onto a lot of tech stuff today, but I recognized, showed somebody a video that I had done, and I was talking to my screen. What their comment was, it looked like I wasn't paying attention. It looked like I wasn't looking at the people that I was talking to. Why? Because the camera was on top of my screen. So I made adjustments. So if you're in this Zoom world, just pay attention to where your camera is. Think about the last time there were multiple people on a Zoom meeting. Where were they looking? What were they doing? Now, I'm going to challenge you to take a look. Next time you're on a Zoom meeting, I want you to pay attention, not only to yourself, but pay attention to the people. Now imagine you're the presenter and you're trying to communicate, right? You're trying to impart this wonderful information. Is everybody listening? Now, I belong to a couple organizations. We have these Zoom meetings, and sometimes there's 30, 40, 50, 60 people in the Brady Bunch screen, right? And the more people, the smaller the square. And so you really got to dig in to look at people. And of course, you don't want to get your face too close to the camera because then that looks pretty strange too, right? But look at the people and see what they're doing. I'm going to bet if you have 50 people on your screen, more than half will not be looking at the camera. They will have the camera off to their side. They'll have their head down. You can tell that they're working. They maybe have two screens and the camera is looking at basically the side of their head while they're off reading emails and doing other things. Now, I know people try to sneak it in. I've been caught before sneaking in a text as I was thought I was clever and getting away with texting, and my eyes were down. It was one of my first Zoom meetings in this organization, and the group leader chatted with me and said, "Hey, how you enjoying the meeting? You like being here, kind of thing." And I realized I'd been caught. But more importantly, it's courtesy, right? It's courtesy to the people. You're going to these meetings for a specific reason, not to go and get disengaged. A lot of the people, and I believe in this, are now saying, keep your camera on. Don't come to the meeting and turn your camera off, because we don't know if you're there. We don't know if you're walked away. We don't know what's going on. And it's discourteous to the people that are talking and communicating. So I think that's really important. Now, again, I've been in these meetings and people are you can tell they're looking at the screen. Their faces are really close and they're checking everybody out. And there's simple tools to be able to do that even a little bit better. But again, this is where it gets crazy, because we're not sitting across the table anymore right now because of the pandemic and the lockdown. And we're not sitting there where we can see people's hands and their movements and what's going on, because body language does communicate if you're paying attention, if you're learning, if you're grasping, and also what they're doing. Now, I have this I'll call it a bad habit. I've been told this many times, is I get a pen in my hand and I'll start to play with it. Now, the worst, of course, is if I got one that clicks the pen out and I start clicking. I mean, this goes back, many, many years. I actually got called out one time in a client meeting, and the client was like, "Are you not paying attention to me?" I mean, literally, that's what they said. And this is way before Zoom and all the other things that we're doing today. And so I realized it's a habit that I have to break. And I think it's important that, making sure you're not doing something that indicates you're not listening. Now, you could be walking right now. You could be riding in your car. You could be in your home office, sitting on your couch and listening to me. Now, you could be on your couch listening to me with the TV on in the background, reading a book at the same time, playing with your cat or your dog, whatever it happens to be. You're not giving me full attention. I want you to listen. Okay. Now, we talk about active listening skills, and this was an article called Important Active Listening Skills and Techniques by a lady named Allison Doyle. And she gave some examples that I thought were pretty interesting on how about how to really pay attention to some different areas and why they're really important. Some examples and statements and questions employed by active listening, right? So building trust and establishing a rapport. Now, how do you communicate? How do you build trust as you're trying to get people to listen? So her examples were, tell me what I can do to help. I was really impressed to read on your website how you donate 5% of your sales to charity. So that says I've done some work, I'm involved, I've gone out of my way, and I'm trying to establish a relationship. Why? Because I've done some homework. As a marketer, I do this all the time when I'm going to be meeting a prospect for the first time. I go out of my way to research and understand so I can talk from a frame of reference as opposed to going in cold and not having any idea what I'm going to say. If you listen to the show, hopefully that comes across in my prep for my guests. I spend a lot of time researching and understanding the guests that I'm going to have so I can have a conversation, right? It's just not me rapid firing questions and jumping ahead. And hopefully that comes across in my previous shows that you listen to, right? So it's about understanding and having that ability. So again, active listening, building trust and establishing rapport is one way to do that. Demonstrating concern is another. Some question types. I'm eager to help. I know you're going through some tough challenges. I know how hard a corporate restructure can be. How is this morale of the staff at this point? Right. So showing some concern, some compassion. Paraphrasing. So what you're saying is, so you think we need to build our social media and marketing efforts? I just want to confirm that you're thinking that. So as you're listening, you're kind of paraphrasing and rephrasing what you just heard. That sends a cue that I've been listening. Simple. Brief verbal affirmation. I understand you'd like to be more frequent about performance reviews. Thank you. I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me about this. So if your employee comes to you and says, look, I really think, whatever, we have to have more soda in the company fridge, you don't blow them off. You don't go start talking about pencils. You want to affirm that you heard them and you understand and appreciate them speaking up. Now, asking open-ended questions is another way to show that you're listening, because you're not challenging, you're not interjecting your opinions at this point. You're trying to get clarity, you're trying to engage more, and you're trying to further the conversation. And I think that's really important. It's clear that the current situation is intolerable for you. What changes would you like to see? Right? So again, an open-ended question. You could also ask very specific questions. How long do you expect the hiring process to last? What is your average rate of staff turnover? So again, digging into the questions, and this applies, by the way, for job interviewing. Now, we're talking about the corporate and personal, but think about when you're interviewing. You're going into an interview for a job. How much research you do. And given today's technology and access to information, if you don't research the company, shame on you. That's right, just shame on you. Because what you don't know is how the interviewer is going to be. Now, I've been in interviews that have been very pointed and challenging. I've been in interviews where I could tell when the person walked in the door, they had not looked at my resume, they had no idea who I was, and they just started making stuff up. Yeah, let's not look at the resume. I don't care about your work history. Tell me what you like to do on the weekend. Is that a good interview question? Yeah, probably. They want to get to know me as a person. But it was very clear to me at that point in time that the exchange and what they were doing was not going to further, and I didn't feel there was a way to interact. So again, all that prep work that I did just didn't allow me to take care of that. So again, I'm off on a tangent. See, I'm doing a little rambling. So again, be very specific in your questions, and wait to disclose your opinion. We as individuals always want to contribute. We feel like we can contribute. But if I'm waiting for you to finish so I can interject my opinion, then was I really listening? Because what have I been doing? I've been formulating my response. I've been thinking about what I can say before you finish, which means I'm not listening. Think about how many times you have done that. whether you're talking to your boss, to a coworker, to a friend, to family, whatever it happens to be. How many times have you been formulating your response or your question or your opinion while they're still talking? If you're doing that, you are not listening. And the other thing I find in looking at similar situations, which I think is a good situation a good context to respond. But again, I find a lot of times that people are formulating their position because they can relate to it, right? I hired this contractor and came in the other day, and he was working on my sink. And one of the things I really wanted to understand was, what kind of tools he was using. And now I might say in a conversation, well, why was that important to you? But so many times the answer that you get from the person you're talking to is, I had a situation like that. The guy came in and he had a saw and I couldn't understand why he was using the saw. What does that have to do with what I was saying? Right? So you have to express that you're listening, because it is so important, right? By understanding what's going on, you can make adjustments and really get a better result from the conversation. And again, depending on your situation that you're trying to move forward with. Now, another thing you need to be thinking about in the person that you're talking to, how do they learn? Right? Are they visual learners? We all know some people are better visual learners and some people are better verbal learners. Now, if you're talking to someone who's better visual learner and you're doing talking or frankly listening to this podcast, close your eyes, maybe you can do some imagination, right? They're at a disadvantage. You're at a disadvantage because you're not working with them in the way they like to learn. So again, even understanding and taking the time to ask. You're going to make a presentation. You're going to have a conversation. Is it a PowerPoint? Is it a video? Is it a written document? Do they have to read it first because they have to read? That's how they absorb information. So again, understanding and being empathetic to how they learn can only help the conversation and perpetuate a situation to a more positive end result. So again, try to understand their point of view. Be more empathetic in your listening as well. Understanding and do not interrupt. Take notes, for example. Just one or two words or phrases that you can respond and to let them know that you've been listening. Now, is the information or message you are going to deliver extremely important? Let the other person know, right? This may help them to understand that they just can't interrupt. We're going to be talking about the state of the company today. This is extremely important, and I need everyone to pay attention. I want you to take a few notes, and you're setting the expectation. Versus, hey, I just want to talk to you today. We're going to shoot the breeze. So if it's important enough, make sure they understand how important it is. If you're presenting something that you need someone to act on, is there accountability? You need to make sure they understand that they have something to deliver, that there's an expectation, maybe an explicit takeaway or deliverable along a specific timeline. Be clear in how you're communicating, because it's important, because you now have an expectation. But if they don't understand it, why? Because frankly, they weren't listening, and maybe you weren't communicating in a way that they absorb that kind of information. And of course, the one we all dread to face, and we have to call out an employee or a colleague for potentially bad listening skills. Again, but be empathetic about that, not challenging. Let them know that there are specific results of that. But again, these are always touchy situations. So again, it's that give and taking, making sure that if they're talking, you're listening, making sure you can respond to perpetuate what they're saying or the conversation. Now, in a Harvard Business Review article by Rebecca Knight, she points out some do's and don't principles that I think are pretty good. So some do's. Make sure your colleagues feel heard and understood by validating their point. That's what I've been talking about. Stress the importance of your message before beginning. So those are 2 points that I just previously covered. Now, some don'ts that she highlights is ignore your colleagues' preferences and how they like to receive information. Boy, I think I just said that. overlook your own communication style. It might be you. We assume they're not listening, but maybe, I doubt it, but maybe it might be the way you communicate that you're not clear in what your expectations are and the information you're trying to deliver. And don't be afraid to call someone out again if you see them distracted. Now, this gets back to that Zoom thing. If you can tell people are not paying attention, even an in-person meeting, in a board meeting, 10, 15 people in the room, you can tell the ones based on how they're sitting, how they're looking. Are they making eye contact with you, for example? If they're not paying attention, again, you have to make the decision how you want to bring that to their attention. But, one of the things that when I was in the advertising business and we would be presenting materials, we found that as we were passing things along, people would tend to dwell on them and look at them. And the people that were anticipating, sometimes they would start to fidget and turn around and not pay attention. So one of the tricks that we used to do is actually walk with materials as they moved around the room. And basically we'd give it a beat, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it happened to be. And then we either say, let's move it on, or we tap the person on the shoulder and say next. And we would actually control the movement. Therefore, we were also a moving presence, and we tended to keep everybody engaged on what we were doing and what we were saying, and things were going along. So think about some tools and tricks. You're presenting to a group. I've done a lot of presentations in my life, and part of it is how do I keep people engaged? I mean, sometimes I've got 150, 200 people. The biggest room I ever had was 500 people. How do you keep 500 people engaged in what you're doing? Now, as you know, I'm Italian, so I'm moving around. My hands are flying. I'm talking with my hands probably faster than I'm talking with my mouth. But the point was, I would try to do things that kept people's attention on me, whether it was my slides, whether it was my hand gestures, whether it was questions to the audience. One of the tricks I used to use in helping to keep people engaged with me is I would meet people prior to the presentation, and I would dig in a little bit about their background and ask them a few questions. And then I would use that in my meeting, in my presentation. So, for example, there's a lot of branding issues that are going on, blah, blah, blah. And, I was talking to Bob earlier there. Bob, you're from whatever XYZ company. And, one of the things that Bob told me, right now, people are like, oh my God, is he going to call on me? Does he know who I am? And so that's some of the tools I used to use, or do use, to get people to pay attention to what's going on, because now I'm engaging. But I would normally get somewhere between 3 and 5 people that I could go to and constantly call them out or reference them throughout the room. Now for yourself, have eye contact with the person or group that you're speaking with, as I was just saying. I think it's really important. You have to show you're engaged as much as they're engaged. Avoid distractions. We've talked about this ad nauseum throughout this podcast. You get the dreaded Zoom. I'm a pen clicker. Turn off your email. That is the biggest one. Why? Because you're looking at your damn computer and your email's popping up left and right. Now, I don't know about you, but it's the shiny penny. I cannot not look at my emails when they're popping up on my screen. Even when I'm working on a project, I have to turn my emails off. Why? Frankly, if it's that important, they'll find another way to get a hold of me. So I turn my emails off for a set period of time, and then I'll check it. But more importantly, when you're on Zoom and trying to show people that you're paying attention, you have got to eliminate the distractions. And whether for me that's a pen, or whether that's turning my head, looking at emails, sending texts, whatever it happens to be. Also with Zoom, depending on the time of the day, you got people eating, you got people doing all sorts of things, right? You got cats. I had one the other day that I thought was hilarious. I'm talking to in the Zoom meeting. There's about 30 of us, I believe there was on this Zoom, and the guy that was talking, his cat was walking back and forth on his desk, but I couldn't see the cat. The only thing I could see was the cat's tail, and the cat's tail was wandering back and forth in front of his camera. It was hilarious, but distracting as hell. I actually couldn't pay attention to anything he was saying. So I know you've been on the Zoom meetings, and maybe you're one of those people that brought your dog and your cat and your kids, right? Some of it's really funny and loving, and the kids walk into the back of the room and see they got caught on camera, want to sit on mom or dad's lap, but it's distracting. The other thing, think about your background when you're, especially in these Zoom meetings, and you're trying for you to either deliver information or make sure that people know you're engaged. But people tend to look what's behind you. Now, we're all using these virtual rooms and things like that. I use one that's very consistently. I hardly ever change it. But I see people changing it. They're on the beach in Hawaii. They're in the mountains. And, I find myself wanting to look. Or I see their bookshelf, and I find myself looking at what books they have on their shelf. Think about distractions. What's going to distract people? And again, be careful about your body gestures and your facial expressions, especially on Zoom. Don't send signals that you're bored or not listening, or you're not thinking about what's important that the speaker is delivering. Body languages and facial expressions. We all get caught with a dreaded eye roll, and people see it. They know. And it's not only maybe the person that's speaking sees it, but other people in the room see it. And again, ask clarifying questions if you don't understand, or you need to just clarify something that's going on. Don't interject your own thoughts as someone is talking. Wait for that point in the conversation where it seems natural that you can start, or being asked to share your input. Now, as I said, listening is an important skill, can have a huge impact on your business and on your personal life. And frankly, I hope you were listening today. So to tie it all up, let me leave you with 5 listening techniques to help you become a more effective listener. Right, pay attention. Let me sum them up. Pay attention. Give the speaker your undivided attention and acknowledge the message that they're delivering. Show that you're listening, again, by paying attention, giving them eye contact, making sure you're not sending the wrong body language. Make sure you're not clicking the pen like I do. Provide feedback when necessary. Defer judgment until the right time. Again, don't interject. And always respond appropriately. Make sure you don't go off in a tangent. Again, these are great listening skills, but they're great communication skills. Now, I want to thank you for tuning in today. As you know, most of my podcasts, I have guests, but today I was just motivated to talk about listening, because I think it's so important, especially given the world we're in today, and especially we look at different generations. We've got new generations. We talk about boomers and millennials and Gen Z, and now we got Gen Xers, and we've got a lot of different generations. And some of these generations are growing up. They will have been on devices since the day they were born, basically. One of my children told me the other day that he remembers when there wasn't an iPhone, or the iPods were just coming out. But we've got other friends that have younger kids who have had these in their hands since they were 4 and 5 years old. So again, as people get older and the generations change, listening skills and communication skills become much harder. So if you've got kids and you've got high school kids or college kids, these are things you can talk to them about as well. Right? Listening is very important. So again, I want to thank you for listening today and joining me here at the cafe. Now, here's my commercial. Listen in. If your business is not growing as planned because of market conditions, competition, your message is not resonating, or for any reasons your business is impacted or by the market that's going on today, your growth is stalled, you need to pivot, you need to scale, or thinking about an exit strategy, and you need to drive company value, then connect with me to find out about our fractional interim and consulting marketing services, or visit theponzigroup.com to find out more. As you know, I have a variety of resources there, blogs and videos and ebooks and all sorts of tools. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And lastly, please subscribe to this show if you're not a subscriber. And if you already are, I encourage you to let others know about this show so they can benefit from the content, hopefully, that you enjoyed today and all the other shows. I'm now in my third year, so I have 110 plus shows for you to listen to. And you can find those at thebusinessgrowthcafe.com, on my website, or you can subscribe on any podcast platform you like to listen to. And I do encourage you, if you are a listener, to take a moment to go to your favorite podcast platform, give me a rating, give me a comment. Hopefully it's a favorable one. And I always like to hear your feedback, because I do these shows for you, not for me. That sounds crazy, but I do it because I enjoy it. I do it because I have an opportunity to share either my own personal knowledge or have conversations with others so you can learn to help your business grow. Don't forget to join me here next week at the Business Growth Cafe.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion at the Business Growth Cafe with your host, Angelo Ponzi. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast and visit our website at www.businessgrowthcafe.com. Read Angelo Ponzi's blogs at www.theponzigroup.com.